Hey everyone, I'm starting today what I hope will be the first of a series on family wealth. And the way I'm going to start this is something a little different and a little bit interesting. It's going to be a Catholic perspective on family wealth in the Catholic tradition. And to talk about this, I'm bringing on a new friend of mine, a guy by the name of Dorian Antešić. And Dorian is a finance professional striving to build family wealth by serving God's little children. He hails from Croatia and is a devoted Catholic. I read his graduate school thesis on family wealth and Bitcoin, and I was quite impressed. And so I asked him to come on and do this episode. So I hope you find this interesting. Here's my conversation with Dorian Antešić, maybe the Croatian Catholic Bitcoiner. Is that right, Dorian? Good to be with you. How are you?
Yeah. I think I'm the Croatian Bitcoiner Catholic, and I didn't met anyone who's outspoken.
Yeah.
So, but hopefully we will change that. This bull.
Yeah, we were just chatting before hitting record here about how I would love to make a visit to Croatia with the family someday. But the topic we want to talk about is something that you told me that you had a passion for, and maybe I'll just frame it as like family wealth in the Catholic tradition, and maybe just to give me a little bit of background on you, Dorian. You and I have had a couple of conversations, but how did you get interested in this topic? Like what's the background to you gaining this passion for this particular topic?
Yeah. Well, the background, it was interesting because I wasn't Catholic at that time. I was born in a Catholic family, but it were like, the nominal Catholic, like you are not practicing mostly. And then after I did my sacraments in 8th or 7th grade, the secular world took me, and I didn't.
We have that in the U.S. too.
Yeah.
There's plenty of that here.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, so I was like, I was firstly an atheist, then like militant, like the one that the annoying guy on Facebook, and then I was like agnostic later because I figured out there's no clear answer. I cannot give clear answer actually if there is or there's not. But agnosticism is just atheists without balls, as my friend calls them. It's all atheism or paganism.
Atheism without balls. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. But I call that's all like paganism because for me atheism doesn't exist. Everyone serves someone, so it's either one god or multiple gods. But so for 10 years I was in that camp, going from one philosophy like Stoicism, Nietzsche, capitalism, from one to another. And then that's all product of not having a good family relationship, I would say. And like most, the devil attacks the family. So and then when you are a bit younger, it's more fearful because you are getting the teenager years. And but that changed a bit when I started to get back into religion slowly. When I read one book, it's Business Secrets from the Bible, from Rabbi Daniel Lapin. I started to read that one. My friend who got me into Bitcoin recommended me, and I started to get a bit know religion, better, like returning a bit, because when I was a kid, before I departed, I was in the church many times, and I knew mass by heart almost, like what the preacher is saying, and so I was getting started a bit. But the main shift for the family part was when I was in Portugal studying, and then my father got ill very fast, like in 1 week. He got corona and then lung problems, and then in 1 week, 1 week from a healthy guy, just like going down in like each day. And then I figure out, and I wasn't in that good relationship, and since I wasn't away, I couldn't be there with the family. So I started to think more about family, like what's I realize how important it is, when you are almost out of it, when you are almost without it. And luckily, thank to God, he had just 5% to survive, as the doctor said like that. And I went to, I think, almost my first time to church in Portugal. It was for Easter 2021 that I went, to pray. I needed any help, and God, God gave his made a lot of impact on that situation. So when I returned to Croatia, I started to read about family wealth because I was searching for a topic for my master thesis. I had just 4 months to write it, and I had no ideas what to write it. And then I started to think about family and how important it is, and how can I connect to that with finance, which was my major. And then I stumbled upon a book, I think Family Wealth for Advisors, and I still read it, and I said, "Man, this is it. This is what I was looking for a very long time. Combination of family, family values and finance." And then I started to research it and write. I wrote my master thesis. It was called Family Wealth in Bitcoin: Sound Money as the Basis for the Creation of a Generational Wealth. Like, make the hypothesis that the Bitcoin as sound money is more suitable to create generational wealth than the fiat money. And that's the start of the family wealth journey for me, from almost death to return to religion.
Wonderful. And I've read your thesis. Excellent job on that, Dorian, here for a young guy. And I'm looking at you right now, and I see you wearing, I think, is that the Saint Benedict medal that you've got?
Yeah.
Cross of Saint Benedict. So yeah, thanks for sharing that story. That's terrific. So I want to get into it because I don't think anyone on the internet has done this conversation yet that I'm aware of. I'm sure someone like Charles Cologne would be able to wax poetic on it. You and I are learning. We're coming from a place of learning, but I think this is going to be fun. But I think maybe the place that I'll start is, at least here in America, and maybe you can tell me what it's like in Europe. This is an unpopular conversation to talk about. It's, in some ways, the idea of family dynasties or family fortunes could be viewed as like un-American or maybe undemocratic or something like that. Certainly un-egalitarian, which is not a virtue that I subscribe to. But I was listening to even like the All In podcast last week. They had Tucker Carlson on their show. And, Tucker Carlson is someone that I more or less would probably align myself with on a lot of things, was talking about how family fortunes are a huge problem. And if I have some time, I'll pull the clip and I'll put it on.
But when you find people who inherited a lot of money, we never talk about that. It's a huge problem in this country. I'm not arguing for the death tax at all, but I'm just saying as an observation, there's a huge class of people with massive inherited wealth, and they're almost all horrible. Not all of them. I mean, I know, very well, I know some of them, and they're fine. Some of them are great. But as a class, they're awful. And they don't help at all. And they're also super annoying and dumb. And I think it's no, it's just true, and everyone knows it's true.
And so I bring that up not to just pick on Tucker, but it's not only Tucker, it's it's the political left as well. It's maybe just populists in general that have this, the Bernie Sanders of the world that have this aversion to billionaires for sure. So what do you think? Like, why is this? Why do you think this is an idea worth pursuing, despite the fact that's extremely unpopular and someone like Tucker Carlson says it's a massive problem?
Yeah. Well, first is I think the envy is always there, but also that the billionaires are default on their own. I think when people now, when people now think of the rich, they only think about the billionaires, right? Or the Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, which are just like very, very small minority of what we can say wealthy, right? They are just like one-hit wonders almost. Like, I think when I think of wealthy, I think of people who work for many years and families that gain wealth, and not just the billionaires, which are like a very small minority. And those small minority of the billionaires, I think the trend, which is in the whole world of the secular, the downfall of the values, it's even more with them. So I think that what the common is, where the people are less faithful, and even those who claim that they are Christian, or more precisely Catholic, that even less are very practical Christian Catholics, right? Who are actually trying to become saints, and not just calling themselves Christians because it's how their family identifies. So if the people who don't have that much wealth are like that, I think that, and are under influence of sins, I think that people who have even more money, who made like billions, it's much easier to do sin than do good. But so they are like mixing those like billionaires with the concept of family wealth.
Yeah.
Which, when I think about family wealth, I mostly think from the Christian perspective of the historical, and of the small people, small families, small in the way that not like the popular mainstream rich magazine families, but the regular families, and which are completely different topics, right? Different ways.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that, because obviously Tucker has a point. The sort of elites in our society today are not good elites in the way that we might have thought of good elites, like in some of the periods of time that I'm going to talk about, where the elites in our society would have this desire to be like father figures, or to have certain virtues that they would show for others. Now our elites are very, despicable in a lot of ways. But I think about, like, a lot of my models are kind of regular families that indeed are wealthy, but not in the sort of billionaire elite sense. I'm from a middle class family myself, and I'm proud of the family I'm from. But like, we have a family farm in Northwest Iowa that's been in the family for 100 years. My family's been farming in that area for 150 years, and so that's something that, as a family, we have certain pride in, and it's kept the family together. It's offered our family this continuity throughout the generations. There's a story of my brother's father-in-law, a guy named Ken Moats, who I really admire. May he rest in peace. He died earlier this year. And Ken Moats moved his family to St. Mary's, Kansas. I think he had a dozen kids now, like 50 or 60 plus grandkids. And what he did in this little town was he started a bunch of businesses, because he knew that was the way to be able to gain employment in a town that doesn't have a lot of employers. So he was starting these businesses for the purpose of raising his kids. And I think Ken died a wealthy man, but he certainly was not, a billionaire. And so, and he was a very good man. So I think these are people that I sort of admire and aspire to be like, that aren't necessarily the elites that we have in our society today. I think maybe, did you say you have something like that in your family with regards to real estate or something of that nature?
Well, we rent apartments during summer, as we have a family house with multiple apartments, and then we live in some and we rent the others, and it's a bit like that for since 1975. I think it's the first time that we gained the guest, because it's when we built the house. But our island is like where I live. It's called Island of Rab in Adriatic Croatia. and we have tourism since I think 135 years. Let's say the official number. So it's a long history of tourism, and families work in tourism, generations, and so we have like in our blood the like hospitality, which impacts the families a lot, in good and bad way, let's say, but having as you said, one place that you can pass on to your children, it's much better. Then you really start to appreciate the family wealth, that is not just the magazine stars, the tech gurus, but just regular people who are doing their job and teaching their offsprings, and then passing on the knowledge to the next generation and to the next generation. I think it's more realistic perspective to look on the family wealth.
Yeah, historically, I think passing on lands has been one of the ways that this has been done probably best. But certainly I see, family business as being a way to do this throughout the generations now. And what I'm curious about, and I think you are too, is, how do you do that with Bitcoin? Could that be a way to even improve upon this model? That's maybe not the point of this episode, but maybe I'll try to cover that on a future episode. But I think to do a little bit of to go a little bit deeper into where you and I are thinking about this in terms of like, our sort of Catholic heritage, you had shared with me sort of a simple point that makes perfect sense in terms of like the biblical background of how this sort of idea actually is pretty biblical. And what are you thinking with regards to that, Dorian?
Yeah. Well, I think that our whole faith is just one generational wealth. Because when you look at how our faith started, is when God spoke with Abraham and made a covenant with him that he and his offsprings, Isaac and Jacob, will multiply like stars and create a great generation, a great kingdom, let's say, Israel. And our whole faith is based on that God spoke with one guy and made him promise that he will create generational wealth for him. And how our faith passed on was, to speak, how Abraham, he spoke with Jacob and Isaac and the rest. And now we are here, right? More than a couple of thousands years later. We are still continuing that generational wealth. So I think that the essence of our faith is generational family wealth. Without it, there will be nothing. Without it, everything would stop with Abraham, and we wouldn't have our faith or anything. And that's the first thing. And you can see in the Bible, in Psalms, when they all praise God. And they always, not always, but in some psalms they end, we will praise you from generation to generation. In Croatia we say od koljena do koljena, which is literal translation is from knee to knee. So when you put your kid on the knee and tell him stories, so from knee to knee, each generation will teach the other generation, and that's the essence.
Yeah.
I think from the faith and from the stories, like. When the Samaritan woman came to the well, right? So to the Jacob well, and Jesus spoke with her. That well was created, I think I read some article, 12 generations before. So when you think so advanced that someone else in 12 generations up front will will have benefit from what you did. I think that's like, that's beautiful for me.
I love it. Yeah. When I interviewed Mother Cecilia at the Benedictines of Mary, Queen of the Apostles Abbey last year, one of the things that she, little bits of wisdom that she shared was what they're doing is they are receiving from their heritage, and they're part of this heritage, and then they're passing it on to the future. And it sounds like sort of a trite thing, but it's kind of countercultural now. We think of ourselves as like living on an island, like I'm a human being. I'm a solo person. I have no sort of connection to anything in the past, and there's nothing that comes after me. And that's not historical, and it's certainly not part of the Christian story. We're part of the Christian story. There's a good quote that I found by St. Charles Borromeo, and he said, he mentioned the beginning of the Holy Gospel of Matthew. So if you read the Gospels, they have these genealogies in the Gospels. You always wonder, like, what are the point of these things? And St. Charles Borromeo says, it inspires us above all to examine attentively the nobility, the remarkable lineage, and the magnificence of the Most Holy Virgin. He's talking about the Virgin Mary. For if that person is to be considered noble who traces his origins from illustrious ancestors, how great is the nobility of Mary, whose filiation traces from kings, patriarchs, prophets, and priests of the tribe of Judah to the seed of Abraham and to the royal stirpe of David. Moreover, although we are not ignorant of the fact that the true nobility, the Christian nobility, is that which the only begotten of the Father conferred on all of us, and that this dignity of nobility is common to all faithful Christians, and this is the operative point. He says, nevertheless, we believe that nobility according to the flesh ought not in any way to be despised or rejected. So this nobility according to the flesh, it's a bit of an earthly phenomenon, but we shouldn't reject it. It's a sort of a human thing. And so I think in that regard, it's biblical. There's a proverb. You mentioned the Psalms. There's a proverb: a good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children, but the sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteous.
Yeah,
and so there we go.
That's directly. But for example, for the Benedictines that you said, like on our island, on my island, it's like we have also nurses, nuns, Benedictine nuns, which are here for around 1,000 years already. And we have actually a couple of monasteries before. The two main ones were the one for the regular, let's say, folks, and then one was from the nobility, we could say, nuns, the nuns who come from the nobility. And we had like that until the Napoleon conquered the Austrian Empire, and then when the French came, they dismantled the noble monastery, and then they connected with the regular folks. So we now have just one monastery, but it's active, for the 1,000 years. And also the church when I go, my parish, the first church there was built in 4th or 5th century. So I think that this is something that's hard to imagine. Some from the U.S., right? That you go to a church or to a place that's built, more than 15 centuries, 1500, right? Yeah, 15.
Amazing.
Centuries. So
yeah, I mean, that's the model of how to think forward 1,000 years, and I think, we're all kind of starving for this sort of heritage, like having a heritage. Like, I think there's like, when you become a boomer, you become really interested in like the ancestry.com stuff, where you try to learn more about where you come from, because nobody really knows, at least not here. Most people in America don't really know much past a few generations where they really come from. Maybe that's different in Europe, actually. But you're just grasping at scraps of, maybe I was somewhere down the line related to Obama or something like that, because Obama's from Ireland.
Really?
But we want to know who we are and where we come from, and we want to know what story that we're part of, and the Benedictines are a great model for that. And one of the interesting pieces about sort of the height of Christendom is that we do have these models of these sort of noble families who produced saints. So they produced great men and women. And, many of these saints were ones that, like Saint Benedict, lived an ascetic life, and, they sort of left the world in order to attain their godly reward. but not all of them. I mean, there were saints sort of in all walks of life. There were noble saints, Saint Louis. I think there's one called Saint Ferdinand, who was a monarch. Saint Wenceslas, I believe, was the patron saint of Bohemia, and these were all sort of. Pardon?
I think the last empire of Austro-Hungary, I think Carlo. I think he's now he reached the sainthood.
Yeah, that's a good a modern example. So it is the case that unlike what maybe Tucker Carlson said, these were men that had a name. They came from a family. Maybe they had certain means, and they were still able to be an example of true kind of Christian nobility, the noblesse oblige. We're recording this on November 7th. We celebrated the feast of Saint Nicholas yesterday. And I don't know if you've heard this, but there's a legend that Saint Nicholas, pardon me?
December 7th.
Oh, December. Did I say November? Thank you. It's early in the morning. There's a legend that Saint Nicholas was a benefactor of 3 sisters who, in order to not have to sell themselves into prostitution, he paid for their dowry so they were able to get married. And the legend is that his wealth came from inheritance. So I think his parents died and left him with gold coins or something like that. And that's what the legend says. And so we have that. So it's not only biblical, but we have these pieces of sort of family wealth in our sort of Catholic heritage as well, too.
Yeah. I mean, Saint Francis, wasn't he also wealthy, or he just sold everything and now he's one of the most important person in the humanity, right?
Yeah. He's probably the most popular saint, right? So most of these saints were from a family. They didn't achieve their sort of sanctity on their own. Like, they came from a place. Many times they came from generations of a family that had a name, that had a certain had certain bona fides. And I think that there's something to be said for that. These are families that for generations had been working to sort of elevate themselves like that. Yeah. So I just think that's a good model of what we're trying to talk about here.
Yeah, true. I mean, what family wealth brings you is the time to contemplate, right? So if you have a wealthier background, you have more time to contemplate on something that is not material. Right. So, for example, the rich folks that Tucker Carlson doesn't like now, right? They have so much money, they don't have to work, but their focus is on different stuff. Their focus is on the material. So they, drink, do drugs, party, sleep around, right? Because their brain is their eyes are on the forbidden tree. But before, if your family has some different values, you will have also more time, but your eyes will be on a different stuff. So the saints, they had more time to contemplate, like the rich folks also have today, but their eyes were on the cross, not on the yacht. So the world gave them free time. They can explore the faith. They can educate. It wasn't that easy to educate. Currently, the education is with a button available. But now you have different problems. That there are so many distractions, right? The Satan attacks you on so many different levels that now, even when you can educate yourself for free easily, you are still less martyr than before. But to go back to the saints, they could study so much, and most of them did, because they had some wealth before, that they were safe. They didn't have to think what I'm going to do now for the future. They could read and practice their faith. For example, the Saint Carlo from Austro-Hungarian, right? So he was in the royal family. He wasn't the one who should get the throne, but the Ferdinand, he was shot. Gavrilo Princip, the First World War, he was dead. So now the Carlo, he was the next to the throne, And but he was raised in a royal family. He had a great education. He spoke with amazing priests and bishops who educated him. And of course, when you have so much available knowledge and your focus is on the cross, you have much more better option to go into that direction of sainthood,
Yeah.
than that you are poor and trying to figure out what you're going to eat tomorrow.
Yeah, well said. Certainly it's a burden to have a family name. You have certain expectations that maybe you're beholden to live up to. And many people can't live up to that. It's certainly a burden to have wealth. And it's like the Spider-Man thing. It's like with great power comes great responsibility. Certainly there's plenty of folks that shirk those responsibilities, or they don't even know what is required of them. It's like they don't even know that there is this thing like the noblesse oblige, where you're required to be. Well, I guess I'm now going Batman, right? Try to be Bruce Wayne, and Bruce Wayne, who was like kind of the sort of philanthropist that Tucker Carlson would probably be okay with, but he also was Batman, right? Like he's trying to save Gotham. That's the sort of nobility that I think we can at least sort of relate to, or we can try to be like Batman in a way.
Well, yeah, true. I mean, the current perspective on the families in general are the socialist conception of family and family wealth and rich folks, who were in essence the enemies of the Catholic Church, right? The socialists, the communists, they are the ones who are attacking, destroying the church in every country that they gain power. In Yugoslavia, in Croatia, they were attacking the church, and Spain, for example, in the 30s, when the socialists came. Luckily, there was Franco who stopped, but unfortunately, the idea of socialism spread throughout Europe and in US, and now our academia and our thoughts and our media is influenced by that. Like destroy family, destroy faith, because if you destroy that, you will create a new system, right? And that's what they want. And so we are at the beginning now in 2023. The socialists came like more than 100 years ago, and so we have 100 years of slowly but steady of socialist ideology, like dripping a little bit into our heads. And now, like 100 years later, our perspective on families and family wealth and of the rich is not the nobility before and the knights, how to gentlemen and ladies, is the they're all dirty capitalists who just want to exploit you, and you should not create family because it will exploit you and all of that, right? So I understand why we have this situation now, because I understand that this is the devil's work. So I'm trying to at least to educate people, as we are now, like taking things from the past and presenting them again, just for them to see an alternative. This is not something that it's new, that is actually before, and it worked. And but it will take time. Unfortunately, I think it will be like Saint Benedict era. You will have to wait until everything collapses, and then we will rebuild everything again.
Yeah, and when that happened, when society was built back, or at least we're talking about kind of Christian Europe. Christian Europe was built back. What you ended up happening was the families that formed, often around these monasteries, would become their own little society, and throughout the generations, these families would grow, and they would sort of grow their lands, and literally the father of the family, the patriarch, was the father of the particular dynasty, and that's kind of where the term fatherland comes from. It was literally the the land of the father. And one of the kind of peculiarities you might say about this sort of structure was, and I know this, I know it wasn't perfect or maybe even exclusive, but it was this idea of primogeniture, which you kind of associate a lot of time with this period of time. And this is something that I've dove into a little bit, Dorian. I don't know how much you've gone into, but I think it's sort of interesting because it does kind of lay out some of the ways that this structure or these sort of family dynasties were able to work or able to continue was through this sort of primogeniture idea. Have you dug into this at all yourself?
Not as extensively as you did. So I think that you will give a better explanation than me.
Yeah. A primogeniture, it's probably a term most people aren't familiar with. It's the idea that there was one person in the family that's in charge of being the head of the family. So usually it's the oldest son, not always, will be sort of the next head of the family after the current head dies. And so oftentimes you think about it as like, oh, that person gets the kingdom, or that person gets the estate, or that person gets the stuff. Although that's not exactly what's happening. That's kind of how people often think about it. But the idea with primogeniture, or at least if I have to try to make a case for why this made sense, or maybe even still makes sense, it's the idea that, like, by distributing inheritance equally, what you do is you could create some incentives to just sell off your non-monetary wealth. And so if you think about, we see this all the time in families today. I see it with families I work with. If there's a family home and the parents die, the thing that happens most often is the kids want to sell the house and they want to split the cash. And what that does is it creates this, it sort of disincentivize the families to sort of just split up. Okay. But what you do by sort of giving the home to maybe the eldest son, you keep someone in charge of keeping the family together and managing the family wealth. And so the family wealth, it's not so much considered the property of the oldest son. It's more considered like an entity in and of itself. Okay. So this is something that belongs to the family as an entity. It's going to continue beyond the eldest son into down into the generations, and probably even added to, is the idea there. And so, like, if it, in the way it's done today, inheritance is done today, like if everyone gets their own inheritance, which is, the default option now, there tends to be less solidarity among the recipients. So, it's like, I get mine, you get yours, see you later. That the family doesn't talk to each other as much. Maybe they meet up less frequently. They move across the country or to various countries, and the family sort of splits up. And so yeah, you get yours, right? And you see this all the time. It's very, very sad. And so what you do is, by essentially creating a steward over that family wealth, like in the case of like the oldest son, you open up the ability for essentially a family welfare system, for lack of a better word. So, in the way that like a socialist might want to have like a state, a state nanny state today to, give us a UBI or something like that. There is a version of that in families. You can have a bit of that in families where the safety net is not taken care of by the state, but it happens inside of the family. And so, instead of having like this sort of egalitarianism where everyone's involved in the family in the exact same way, they're all involved in the same positions, you might have various roles in the family. So you might have like the oldest son, he's the steward, he's in charge of, obviously being the person, the head of the family. You might have, maybe one of the sisters never marries, so she becomes a Benedictine nun. You might have, or you might have a monk or a priest or something like that. Oftentimes, like the youngest son doesn't have anything to do, so he becomes like the adventurer. That's like there's this adventure tradition in like European history, like the D'Artagnans of the world, of Three Musketeers, or the youngest son maybe would travel to the New World and try to set up a life for himself in like New Spain or something like that. That was something that happened. And so you have various roles in the family. If someone and the family is needs to be protected from the world, like it's a drug addict or something like that, they have a place to go. They can go live in the family house or something like that and get themselves back on their feet. And so that's sort of the idea as to what the purpose of the family home is for. Is you have a fallback system, you have a bit of a welfare system for the family. And so this idea of primogeniture gets misunderstood. Certainly there's like extreme examples of how this has gone wrong throughout history. So I'm not trying to like glamorize it, but it's not the case that it's the first son gets everything and then and nobody else gets nothing. It's really the family is something that everyone is a part of. And the son has important obligations as the steward to the rest of the family. His role is a burden. So he's responsible for finding, good marriages for his sisters, finding gainful employment for his brothers, things of that nature. And I think that's the way that I would try to make the case for primogeniture.
Yeah, that's what you said about selling off the properties. That's similar thing that's what's happening currently in Croatia. I think the 80% of last year, 18% of the property that were sold were bought by foreigners, so not Croatians, and because people are starting to sell their fatherland, because a lot of things changed just in 70s years. Like for example, my grandfather, he was still living in the old style where the family. So my last name is Antešić. And we had the house Antešić, where everyone, the fathers, the cousins, like 20 people live in one house. So it was like little villages, not little villages, but like part of the village was like house Antešić, house this. Right? So my grandfather, who was raised there, when he got married and they got my father, they moved into our house now. So each from one house where like multiple families live, but with the same surname. In a couple of years, they all moved to each house, right? So my grandfather built his house, his brother built another house. So one house, now it's 5 houses. And so that's like one generation. Then my father, of course, my grandfather was raised in a communist country. So the communists after the World War II, we were before in Austria-Hungary, then the communists came, the Yugoslavia now became, so everything was nationalized and most of the properties. But later, the properties were again distributed, not everything, but some land. And so my father was raised in that, and then in his 20s, the Croatian independence war started. He went to war in the 90s, 91. So his childhood was in the communists, but his 20s plus were in Croatia, which was in transition from communist to capitalist system. And privatization, a lot of bad things happened. But people were still there, their nature was still you have your property. In Yugoslavia, you didn't have stock market, right? So people, when they had surplus, they were investing into land, real estate. They were building another floor. So they had one floor, and then they would build another floor for their children or for guests, because we have tourism. So that was the way for the last 100 years. So nobody was selling their properties, even when when you get something from the legacy, you are not selling it, you are keeping it. But the thing was that everything was divided almost the same, right? So you had one property, and then you have you and your brother, then it will be split, and then that property, it will be split, right? So now the island you have a lot of property, but everything is in different places. It's not one land. So it's not economical to make anything from it, from the agriculture or make some business. It's not economical because you have to travel from a plot of land to another plot of land, which is maybe in another village on an island. So that's one of the problem which it's happening when you don't have a stewardship that you were saying. But now the new problem is that people are starting to sell the land, right? So they have small pieces of land here and there, and now they are starting to sell it. Because what are you going to do with the small piece of land, right? You cannot make agriculture, and here in Ireland it's either like sheep or wine or olives, right? But to make a business from that, you need a bigger portion of land to make it more economical. So you cannot do business, and since we are in tourism, people don't have that much time to go on the land, and technology. So people are more in the houses than on the land. So they are now selling the properties, and unfortunately, most of it is bought by foreigners. So 80% is bought by foreigners because they have bigger pockets. And so now I reckon what you're saying I sympathize what you're saying about the primogeniture, because I can see just in 70 years lifespan, what so many things happened. And when you don't have a strong, let's say, strong steward who will manage all of that and not split everything, you quickly get deteriorate family, right? So family is going everywhere, family members everywhere. They are not.
Yeah, yeah. To me, like, I'm coming from a place of admiration and learning here. I don't exactly know how to implement this in my own life. I mean, I guess that's what we're going to work out here, hopefully on this podcast, or a future podcast, I should say. But I will say, I admire the ethos of the Bitcoiners who take pride in never selling their Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And there's a sense that, like, I'm just going to keep adding to my holdings or adding to my Bitcoin. That's the kind of Michael Saylor, I think, mentality. He's never going to sell. And there was a certain ethos of that in, like, this heritage in Christendom, where the expectation was not only that you were not going to receive your own lands, split apart the kingdom, although that did happen sometimes, but you would actually add to the lands as well too. And like a sign of the success of your family was that you were adding to your lands. And so, maybe there should be this ethos in Bitcoin that, over the generations, not only do you not sell your stack, but the expectation is that you would actually add to your the family's Bitcoin holdings as well too. Or maybe that's the aspiration.
Well, that is certainly for me.
Yeah.
That's something that motivates me, to work and pray and stack sats, each day a bit by bit. But the stacks is increasing, and hopefully, my future children will have some, if God wills, of course.
So as you point out, one of maybe the most important piece of family wealth is not necessarily it's monetarily wealth, although that's important too, but you have like your family capital, so like the human capital, and also I think I kind of want to just talk about like family traditions, so like what is actually being passed down to the from generation to generation in the families. And there's this commentator that I had read. His name is Monsignor de Lassus. I think he was a French 19th century counter-revolutionary. And he said that while the body of a family is its home and lands that it transmits intact from generation to generation, its soul is constituted by its traditions. And so he said the tradition is the legacy of the ideas of the ancestors and their sentiments, as well as their organic practices and customs. And so I think this is important too. Part of what we're talking about here is not just, having some land to pass on, but actually to have a real tradition, a real story with your family as well too. And, Dorian, you've shared some of this with me today from your own family. I love that. That's, tell me more about how you think this is important.
Well, coming back to the beginning, right? Our whole faith is traditional, generational wealth. And I think that's the most important glue to create family wealth is the faith, and faith by itself is a tradition. And you need to have some glue that will connect the family.
Yeah.
And the tradition is that because each member of the family will go in different directions, but you need to share something with them, with the rest of the family. And the tradition is that, and especially in Catholicism, we have the tradition, from the saints, from the feasts, the holidays, even the fast, fasting on Friday. That's a beautiful, hard tradition, and but it's important, just to put your eyes on the price. Right? The tradition is that we get some good things that happen through generations, and then we keep it, and then we pass that on, and that reminds us to lead our lives better. So if society stops making the tradition, which is happening, right? So we are replacing the world, right? It's replacing the Christian tradition with the more of the secular version, like for example for the Advent, right? For the Christmas time, it's less about Jesus and more about the Santa Claus and all and that. So one tradition, I think for the family, if you see some successful families, they have the traditions and the values that everyone shares, and that's same in Croatia as it's in the US and the rest of the world.
We example of that in our family, or at least what I see with my people, if you will, like we would align ourselves with like the sort of Irish Catholic tradition. And a lot of the people in that tradition, what I've noticed is the way that they sort of display that sort of heritage is by getting drunk on St. Patrick's Day, drinking Guinness, going to the Irish festival, which by the way, Kansas City has got a terrific Irish festival. Like, so I enjoy these things too, but it does ring a little hollow if like that is the extent of your kind of family heritage, is like, it's the fact that you wear green on St. Patrick's Day or something like that. And so I think one of the things that my family has done, to our credit, is we have kept the faith that's been passed down for centuries in my family. If you travel to County Offaly in Ireland, where my family is from, like there's flatteries buried in the Catholic cemetery from the 1700s, and at this parish, I think his name is like Saint Reinid's, maybe, which is like a saint that only is a local Catholic saint. It's not even recognized by Rome. It was like a local tradition. This is very cool. But I think that to my family's credit, we've kept that over the centuries. Whereas like a lot of Irish Catholics, it's more about like, drinking green Bud Light or something like that on St. Patrick's Day. And so I think that's something that I think we're quite proud of, much more so than like the family lands or something that's been passed down, which is, not a big deal. But I think that the tradition is the most important piece.
Yeah, man, that's great. That's great. I mean, here with my family, we kept the faith more in the traditional part, right? So you are raised as Catholic, you are going to the church, you do the sacraments.
Yeah,
I'm trying to relive the proper faith, with my family, to get back them on the right track. So we will see how that goes, but we do have Sundays. For example, Sundays are of course big things if you are a Christian. So I think that's the beautiful tradition that everyone gathers and you go to church. I think going to church is a great family tradition to build wealth. Everyone comes to the same place and with the same goal, and you see all other families together. So I think that's the things that you do in general now, but that you don't, I guess, think a lot.
How far do you live, Dorian, from your family?
I currently live with my family.
This is interesting. I wasn't planning on asking you this, but something I think about is like, especially like in digital nomad life, or increasingly like my business is virtual and I could work anywhere and with anyone. You could live anywhere, and yet you decided to move back home.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, 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 yeah.
like you said, you've lived around the world and done kind of the digital nomad life yourself, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I started the digital nomad lifestyle while I was still in faculty, because I went, to student exchanges, and I worked, freelancing while I was studying there in Prague and Portugal. And last year I lived in Spain, in Andalusia. But when as I was getting back into faith, I realized that the digital nomad lifestyle, it's more about escapism, I guess. I think that's the correct word. You're trying to escape the problems, and most likely it's some family's problems that you don't want to face. And so when I was getting into religion back, when I was trying to live as a saint, not so successfully, but a lot of time going to confession, but you're trying. My whole life shifted, philosophy. Just in 3 months, I figured out why I was traveling that much, and I read in the Bible, the think where in the story of Abel and how it's called now, in the brother murderers, in the Abel and
Cain and Abel.
yeah. Trying to remember how it's in English. So the God, the punishment he gave to the brother, it was to live like a nomad and not to feel at home anywhere. So that was the punishment. And then I tried, I started to think about digital nomads, and that's, when you start to travel, you get the travel bug, and then you cannot stop anywhere, and then you are just like without a home. You never feel at home. You're just traveling, and then you're at one place, and then you have to go. So when I returned from Spain, and I started to practice religion. And in 3 months, like, I started to see why I was mostly traveling. And then I say, okay, I will stay for 1 year to change things. And I'm still here, but I did travel in this 1 year a lot also, but shorter trips. But in Croatia, it's still a tradition to live with your families. So, for example, our grandmother also lives with us, just in a different apartment. So we all, like, 3 generations: grandmother, father, mother, and myself and sister. So when you get married, you change the place. But currently it's still in the same house, right? So you just go to a different flat, because we have multi, houses with more floors. So you just go.
Yeah.
Like, the grandmother is on the 0, and then my father on 1, and then later. And so that's also, I think, a good tradition, which it's a bit shifting currently, that people are still living in the places where they are born, or with their families. But it's cool. But I do plan to to change a bit now, to go to Zagreb for a bit. But that's the one of the plan of building family wealth.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. And yeah, dare I say, again, it's maybe like Bruce Wayne came back to Gotham, right? He was away for college or whatever it was he was doing. This is great. Well, Dorian, this has been terrific. Hopefully this is the first of other conversations that you and I are going to have. But yeah, you've got a lot going on right now. You have a lot of different projects in the works. Where's the best place to send people to learn more about you?
I think currently is LinkedIn. So my profile on LinkedIn is the most accurate, let's say, where I post mostly. So I think that you go there, follow, add, send request, and
Yeah,
that's the main stuff.
I'll put the link in the notes, and always a pleasure. Good to chat with you.
Yeah, same thing, Andrew.
Good King Wenceslas looked out on the feast of Stephen, when the snow lay round about, deep and crisp and even. Brightly shone the moon at night, though the frost was cruel, when a poor man came in sight, gathering winter fuel.